back, folks, to the Bacta podcast. We are Bacta today with a two-parter. We're going to do part one here, episode 6, because I was out, unfortunately, last week, and so we're going to catch up on that. And then we're going to do part 2, which will be the finale. We are in two-player mode this week. To my right, my favorite Sky guy, Mr. Rob Fontaine.
Hey, what's up? It's me. I'm back. I'm here. I'm doing the thing. We're going to talk about Star Wars.
Talk about Star Wars. Not Harold, but Rob.
No.
Unfortunately, Cam has given birth to the chosen one, I hear.
Yes, there is another.
There is another. Congratulations to Cam on his birth of his new baby daughter. So that's kind of amazing.
Very happy that he was able to show off that, don't tell me the odds onesie on the last show.
Yes.
So we've checked in with him. Everybody's doing great. Mom's feeling good. Cam's feeling good. Baby's feeling good. We're very happy for them.
And we're just anxiously awaiting the midi-chlorian count. We're going to be live tweeting that for sure. Once
Indeed. I'm sure the force is strong with her.
Very strong with her. All right, so jumping right in. Episode 7, Dreams and Madness, directed by Geeta Vasant Patel. Now, 2 fun facts.
Ooh, okay.
1, her previous credit to this was The Lord of the Tides on the House of the Dragon. Fun
Wow,
fact,
okay.
In case anybody was watching that show.
I do like that show.
But what's interesting about this title to me is it's not just the title of a documentary about Studio Ghibli, fun fact.
Okay.
But it's also the Balin's label for the Night Sisters' ancestral home. So, 2 fun facts about that.
I like that.
The Studio Ghibli thing, I think, is just a coincidence, but it was kind of a cool play on words there. So we start on Coruscant, where Hera is facing a court-martial hearing due to her recent defiance of orders to aid Ahsoka and Sabine. Mon Mothma oversees the proceedings, aided by once again our favorite blatant Imperial plant, Senator
God.
Jono, complete with droid discrimination.
Yes, dude is a complete droid racist, and I like that in Star Wars. That's a really good barometer for, somebody's moral worth.
Yes.
Is how do they treat droids?
How do you treat the droids?
Yep.
Are you calling them a bucket of bolts?
He's just like, it's a droid of all things. They're coming. Can we even excuse this? And Chopper's got some words for that.
Yeah, Chopper's about to commit another war crime over that. It's like
he's about to let the chopper sing is what he's about to do. Yeah.
Let the chopper chop. So as Jonah complains, her report reads like a child's fairy tale, Jedi, false Jedi, star maps, star whales, distant galaxies. Honestly, are we to believe any of it?
Well, which is crazy to me because at this point, fact, Morgan Elsbeth was boosted out of prison.
Fact.
On Corellia, there was an Imperial remnant that was shipping goods off to parts unknown.
Fact.
On Mandalore, Moff Gideon was assembling some sort of strange, weird cloning dark trooper facility.
Yeah, casual.
That was recently destroyed by the Mandalorian faction, which Carson Teva brings up in court. And this dude's just whatever, man. That's just not I'm not buying it.
Actually, that's my point. They're like a one-off warlord. And you're just it's just.
Like
ridiculous.
you said, you have to question this guy's loyalties at this point because you're just there are things that are you can look at where it's just maybe some of this is feeling a little far-fetched as far as the specific details about fallen Jedi and world between worlds and all that, but you have to at least say there's something going on here with this Imperial remnant.
Yeah.
There's some sort of Imperial plot afoot that this guy is just
where there's smoke, there's got to be some fire. He's not a warlord acting on his own. So, but what's interesting about this moment is that it tells us when this show takes place, unequivocally, right after the 3rd season of Mandalorian. So it has been about a dozen years since the end of Rebels.
Yeah,
so that's the timeline they've kind of. I think that was part of why they put that part in there, was to kind of give us a real foothold on when things were taking place. But
for sure.
But yeah, just as Hera seems destined for a decrease in rank, she's bailed out by the one and only C-3PO, played by the Star Wars GOAT himself, Anthony Daniels.
Our guy.
Yeah.
Coming in our goldenrod.
Yeah.
He's coming in hot. He's got the message from our good friend, Senator Leia Organa.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they gave C-3PO a moment to shine here and they didn't go to deep fake Leia here.
Yeah,
You know what
yeah.
I mean? I mean, they could have gone that way. Obviously, they've already done it with Luke. They did a Leia deep fake in Rogue One
Yeah.
very briefly.
Yeah.
But wherever they can avoid that sort of de-aging, face morphing technology, I think it's for the best, personally.
I totally agree. I mean, I think it's a great way to kind of mitigate that risk of doing bad AI or CG or kind of making it about something that's not the story, right?
Yeah.
But I think it kind of like really unfortunately highlights the difficulty of the timeline of the show.
For sure.
Because like as we mentioned before, like Leia and Luke should be like all up in this right now. Like you talked about how Luke's school is just in shambles, but like this would be a big part of what they were involved with, honestly. So
Luke's like fresh out of the IKEA store, looking at the instructions for his like little Jedi huts.
Is
just
this
not
an
really
Allen
sure.
key? Is this a lightsaber? I don't know.
They didn't put any words in this. And then Leia, I mean, we have to presume that at this point, this is already after she's walked away from her Jedi training with Luke. If she's not hanging out with him and she's moved on to a political career, being like, this is actually where I'm more meant to be in this forming of a new republic, is to be in a more guiding political sphere rather than as one as a lightsaber wielding Jedi.
I think it's interesting too. They're laying some breadcrumbs here for like future Leia actions. You know, they're talking about like she gets frustrated with the New Republic enough to form the Resistance to counter the First Order. So it's like they did a bunch of this in this episode where they kind of like fed their past using this, like they're. The things they've already made using this as kind of like the lead up sort of breadcrumbs. So
they mentioned that she's like the head of the Defense Council for the New Republic, which makes sense because I believe the story is by the time we get to episode 7 that there is no standing army in the New Republic.
Right.
And she's essentially leading this faction of people that are just like, well, it's kind of weird to think that Leia's maybe leading like the New Republic Proud Boys in a way, but like you'll take these blasters from our cold dead hands. But it turned out she was right. I don't know. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't want to put that on Leia, but it does have that feel a little bit where you're like, hey, we got to protect our country and our galaxy.
There's a whole lot of Leia stuff going on that's just behind the scenes right now, and we're just not seeing any of it, which I think is honestly, I mean, what are you going to do?
It's tough, like you said. It's just their hands are tied a bit.
Yeah. Meanwhile, in the belly of a hyperspace traveling whale, Ahsoka is going through some slow motion lightsaber exercises instructed by hologram Anakin Skywalker, who name drops for the first time a few Star Wars greats like Asajj Ventress, and Dooku. So this actually isn't the first time Ahsoka has been seen viewing Anakin's hologram on screen. In Rebels Season 2 episode Shroud of Darkness, her and Ezra actually watch a clip together.
That's right.
And a few moments later, Ahsoka comes face to face with Anakin again as she learns that her former master has transformed into the Sith Lord Darth Vader.
I thought this was an interesting moment to kind of draw that parallel, especially as she sees to have come more to peace with her relationship with Anakin and her place in his life and all of that, because I think, a lot of where, it's been brought up a lot that, Ahsoka, I know you've brought it up. Ahsoka is a little bit down, a little bit dour. Kara, I remember we were talking a little bit about that before the show. And truly where we leave off with her in Rebels is sort of a low point where she had been helping with the rebellion, but she didn't fully know about the fate of Anakin. She just assumed he was gone, he was dead, that she didn't feel his presence in the Force any longer. But then to have to grapple with the reality of where he was and then what that means for her and what's embedded in her as far as like what she's taken away from that.
It's a responsibility on some level. She bears some of that, it's not nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that she's just like, oh, if I internalized all of his training and I saw myself as always kind of like relating to him, what does that mean for me? And how I see the world and what could end up happening to myself. And so the fact that I think obviously a lot of what her journey was through in that 5th episode with the World Between Worlds was kind of coming back to grips with all that. And I think it's nice to see her embracing her master and his teachings again and feeling good about that and being like, well, there is still, because what Anakin ultimately, what he was trying to train her is because he cared about her and wanted to see her. And he says that in the hologram, that this is all to prepare you because there may come a day when I'm not here to help you any longer. And I hope that these teachings will be there for you when I'm not.
Yeah, I think it's a really nice nod to the closure that she got from that encounter in a way that kind of wraps up nicely in a bow. Do you think that this is the first time she's looked at those since she found out? That's what I was. It's fun theory of making.
I have to believe that it is. I think that she probably has not booted up one of those holotapes since she found out about Vader, because she's probably looked at it as tainted material.
Yeah.
Similar to, this is maybe a little out there, but like the idea of like if there's a piece of content you enjoy by a creator and then you find out something about that creator that you're like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe this isn't like, I don't feel so great about this person, but like, and there's some time and some distance, but they talk about like separating the art from the artist, and I think that's a little bit what Ahsoka's doing here in this.
That's a very good analogy. Yeah,
where it's
absolutely.
just like, with these things can still mean something to me without necessarily taking the whole of it, and also embracing the complicatedness of this person, and still this intention was a good thing and meant in a good way. And I do think, yes, all that to say, to cut to the chase, I think this is probably the first time she's watched this since finding that out.
Yeah, I mean, there's that moment of like, he was a good master. Like, I think that's something that she has been struggling with. I mean, all of Clone Wars, and like, there's a lot of conflict there, and I think it's probably hard for her to say that, knowing what he becomes. It's like that he was a good master, and to own that also, not just to like battle with it. So
yeah, and even Hu Yang says at that moment, like, oh wow, he was more thoughtful than I ever really gave him credit for, or ever thought he was.
Yeah,
because I think it's Hera that asks, a couple episodes ago, hey, her master, what was he like? And Hu Yang just says, intense. He was intense. And so it's for him to see that other side. And I think that shows you how other people saw Anakin, because obviously we see more of him as a full person, as a three-dimensional character with these issues and things that he's struggling with. But I think probably for a lot of people in his life, in Star Wars, they just see him as like an arrogant, chosen one, quote unquote. Sky guy. Yeah.
Continuing on, in a kind of Empire Strikes Back homage, Hu Yang references the astronomically terrible odds of getting where they're going as they begin to experience some serious fasten your seatbelt like turbulence inside the whale. Ahsoka, despite Hu Yang's protests, insists they get out there, and as it turns out, the path to Peridea is littered with mines, a precaution taken by Thrawn to prevent any Purgo from approaching the planet. Fortunately, the Star Whales have some thick skins.
Luckily for them.
And just as Hu Yang praises them for their cover provided, they escape into hyperspace, leaving Ahsoka and Hu Yang behind with one of my favorite lines from the show. You had to say something.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, those poor Purgo, he's just like, yeah, we could use them as human shields. I mean, whale shields, and then they just noped out of there. Just like, you know what? Actually, now that you say that, now that I understand what our relationship is, no thanks. I'm out of here.
Should have stayed in the whale.
He should have stayed.
As enemy fighters approach, Hu Yang drops another Empire reference, the very familiar line, "We're going to get pulverized if we stay out here much longer," which this is a direct quote from Leia. Lots of Leia stuff and Empire stuff in this episode.
Oh, yeah.
Back on Thrawn's ship, and thanks to some intel from the old Inquisitorial database, boy, would I love to get a look at that, by the way. That's like just the fact that it's a thing. It's like, I don't know, it feels like the guide to being a badass and spinny lightsabers, but always losing.
Yeah. It's just like step 1, spin lightsaber. Step 2, shrug. Like, if that doesn't work, go back to step 1.
Always find the people, never catch the people.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think there was a lot of book burning or file burning, I'm sure, with the Jedi archives getting destroyed. So I don't know how much true knowledge was left over, which explains a lot as far as their lack of technique.
Yeah, their lack of knowledge is disturbing. So back on Thrawn's ship, Thrawn learns that Ahsoka was once Anakin's apprentice, which is kind of a big moment. So Thrawn has firsthand experience with Anakin Skywalker because they crossed paths during the Clone Wars.
Yes.
And he bonded with the idea that they were kind of kindred, unconventional tacticians and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I guess he learned that Anakin Skywalker and Vader were the same person during a mission with Vader.
Yes.
Okay, but kept the secret to himself.
He did, and there's a line essentially where in the book, which I've not read, but I've seen the excerpt printed, on various social medias and such, where essentially they kind of acknowledge without saying out loud exactly who Vader's true identity is.
Okay.
And where, Vader says essentially to Thrawn that, like, Anakin Skywalker is dead. This is the last time that I will mention him, and this is the last time you will mention him. And Thrawn says essentially along the lines of, like, yes, but our endeavors will, like, basically be, in his honor going forward. Kind of saying, like, I understand, I won't bring it up, but, like, hey, buddy, like game respect game, like
Game respect.
we're
game. I
still
like that.
we're still together. We can. I think he I think he has a lot of respect for Anakin in both of his iterations.
Yeah, for sure. So on the planet's surface, we found out the name of the shell people. It's the Noti.
Yes.
So the Noti have taken their wagons on the road, Oregon Trail style, which gives Ezra and Sabine time to catch up. Mm-hmm. I kind of wish we had heard their previously on Star Wars, I like their whole lead up to this, because I feel like I don't know that they're rewriting history for Star Wars here, but I'm just curious what the show thinks of the show a little bit. Like, what do the characters know inside the show about what's going on? Because there's they have this recap, the Emperor died, Ezra asks, and Sabine goes, that's what people say, which is a nod to this thing later on in the new somehow that
Palpatine has returned. Somehow
it's like looks. It's like this the franchise going, look, see, this is a thing that could have happened. This is they see people thought this.
Yeah,
I don't know. I just attempt to make it more plausible. I was just kind of and then the Zeb shout out, which was cool, I guess. But
yeah, no.
What do you think of this recap? I guess
it was interesting. I agree that it would have been cool to get a bit more specificity of what exactly she told him, and maybe even what does she mention about Luke? What does she mention about a rebuilding of the Jedi Order?
Yeah.
Would he have interest in that? I'm sure he would.
That's exactly.
I would have to think he would. And then obviously, she left out some pretty important details about how she got there. But still. But yeah, it would have been interesting to see exactly. Yeah, what's the news? What's the word on the street as far as
what's
Star
happening
Wars?
on Star Wars Twitter?
Exactly at this point,
he's been off the grid for a while.
Because even by the time we get to the sequels, people talk about the legend of Luke Skywalker and the fact that he was this hero, and even Han Solo being regarded as a rebel hero.
Yeah.
And just what are those conversations around that? What does she tell him as far as what's the important information that gets passed down versus what's rumor and what's speculated on? Because even this, again, going back to the court-martial very briefly, the guy's just Jedi and fallen Jedi, false
Jedi.
Again, fact. Luke Skywalker, Jedi Knight, was not only exploded the first Death Star, but was in an instrumental part of exploding the second Death Star and this supposed fall of the Emperor.
I'm just picturing you yelling in the courtroom, "You can't handle the truth."
You can't.
This guy,
he doesn't know what he's
that guy Kara in the
talking
booth. I love
about.
that.
Oh my God, what are you doing? He's just. This guy shows up in other shows and he sucks now. He sucks later. Dude sucks. Capital S sucks.
Now you know, folks.
He sucks. Dude sucks.
Dude sucks.
Sucks out loud.
Oh, God. All right. So after the recap, or during the recap, Sabine reveals that AHSOKA took her on as apprentice. And Ezra just very smoothly goes, "She what? Why? No.
Why?
No, that's great. Makes sense, of course. Just...
Let's be honest. Ezra was all of us here a little bit.
Yes.
I feel like that's, them kind of having to acknowledge a bit of the well, she had never sported any sort of interest or talent for using the Force or wanting to be a Jedi.
Yeah.
So I completely understand somebody that's been out of the game for 10, 12 years being like, wait, what? But it is interesting.
What am I missing here? Yeah.
Right. And certainly he acknowledges I can see it.
That's all. That was exactly. Yeah. Makes sense.
She's unconventional. You're unconventional. I'm sure it'll all work out.
Moving on.
Mm-hmm.
I had that. He just mirrors the reaction, I feel like, of all the Rebels fans watching this show.
and this is a point where I kind of have a gripe. I know we're going to go into a part 1 and part 2 here. I have a pretty serious gripe with some of the structuring of these episodes that kind of starts at this moment of, okay, crab people are cute, but logistically, okay, but why are they hanging out with them long term?
Yeah, what...
I don't understand the logic of it, especially when they're
literally using them as shields. That is what we've established. Anyway, we'll get there.
For now, I can sort of kind of understand because maybe it's marginally faster than being on foot, and they're taking them where they're going.
Is it though?
I don't know. And certainly the situation.
They literally look like snails.
Yeah. Well, I'll come back to it later. But this is where I was first just so wait, where are they going? Are they going to Thrawn's ship at this point? I don't know what the plan is at this, and that left me confused and maybe a little frustrated. So anyway, we'll continue.
Oh my god. Okay, so as Ahsoka's shuttle, by the way, why are we calling this thing a shuttle? It doesn't look like a shuttle. It's a starfighter.
It's a T6 Jedi starfighter, right?
No, they call it a shuttle in this episode, and they call it a shuttle in the next episode. And it's like the Jedi shuttle is approaching, and it's like this is not this. We're not hauling cargo. That's like a full on star. Anyway, just a little thing. For
I
We're getting
point.
amped. I love this. Okay, all
Good
right,
point.
here we go. So as they shelter in the Purgle-sized elephant graveyard around the system, Huyang tries and fails to detect Sabine with the ship's sensors. So Ahsoka reaches out to Sabine through the Force in yet another Empire reference.
Yes.
As Luke does to an untrained Leia in Cloud City towards
Very
the end
much
of
so.
Empire Strikes Back. Does this count as Sabine using the Force?
I might give her like a half point here.
Half point, okay.
You know,
Partial credit.
This is a partial credit because like she's definitely using the Force in that like it's a connection, but like we've seen her try to make an outgoing call at this point. You know, and she was in prison there. She tried reaching out to Ahsoka. Granted, Ahsoka was in hyperspace at the time, but you know, no signal detected.
We're sorry. The caller you're trying to reach,
Cannot be completed as dialed.
Yes.
But in this instance, I don't know that because the only times I can think of this sort of connection happening is generally between two Force sensitive characters.
Yeah.
And so the fact that Ahsoka is able to make that connection with Sabine, and the fact that Huyang even says, "Do you think your connection or your bond is strong enough to do that?"
Yeah.
Which I think does imply that there needs to be some sort of reciprocal.
Right. Two to tango.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
you
sure.
need to have a receiver on the other end for there to, you know, be a Force connection. So
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to say as well, like partial credit. I think it requires, it's kind of like, you know, she doesn't have any juice in her batteries. So Ahsoka's providing all the juice, but she's still, you know.
She's getting a bit of a
there.
jump
Yeah,
here.
she's getting a bit of a jump. Exactly. Okay, so back on the ship, Thrawn enlists the Great Mothers to force triangulate Night Sister style Ahsoka's location, and the ensuing turbo laser blasts from the Eye of Sion flush her shuttle ship out of hiding and down to the surface. This was a moment of wait, what for me, because it was like
Take me through it.
then earlier on, Thrawn's like, let's leave her be. You know, like it explains in tactics, like if we let her do what she wants to do, then we'll be ahead of her at every step, which doesn't really make sense. But and then he's like, 2 scenes later, yeah, let's shoot her down. It's like, are you gonna leave her, or are you gonna shoot her? Like, we're not gonna shoot her with TIE fighters, though. We're gonna shoot them with big lasers as opposed to TIE fighters. It's like,
yes.
Is there a difference? I don't think tactically it makes much of
All
a
I can
difference.
say to that is like, because for sure when they go into the ring, into the elephant graveyard, like it's obviously very reminiscent of the asteroid field.
Yep.
And it's clear that like, you know, they talk about Anakin is able to pod race because he has Jedi-like reflexes.
Right.
So it takes an above average pilot to navigate that sort of thing safely. And I think Thrawn is kind of like realizing that and just being like, if we just send fighters in there, we're just going to be throwing away like resources.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Versus,
okay. But I mean, sure. If that was the main point of his thing, being like we're throwing away resources, okay. But he specifically says, like this whole thing about like we're learning more about our opponent, and we need to see what she'll do, and that way we'll be ahead of her. And it's like, no.
yeah.
Like you're not doing that. You're waiting, and then 2 scenes later, you're just like, okay, we'll blow her up with something else now. It's like I don't know. It kind of just bumped me as not very Thrawn.
I can see where you're coming from with that. The way I looked at it is, and maybe it's just like a trouble of like the way it was written, but I took that as we don't need to chase. She's coming to us. Like
Okay.
we know ultimately what her plan is.
Yeah.
She can't get out of here without being on this ship.
Right.
So all we need to do is essentially choose her path for her, which is like, we don't need to chase because then she'll go off in some other direction. Let's try to kind of force her down a path, which I know is kind of what you were saying. Like, I don't know if that's what we're doing
I think
here.
maybe the writing just need to be tweaked with that for like what exactly he was
Maybe
saying.
explain his tactics a bit more, because I do think that like that is very much what Thrawn's whole deal is that he's a tactician. He's somebody that's going to try to get to know his opponent, and through getting to know his opponent, better understand what measures they'll take and what actions they'll take and respond appropriately before they get there.
By the way, funny enough, Morgana, kind of does the exact same reaction that I had, where despite traveling like through galaxies to save this guy, she kind of just goes, you sure about that?
She does that a lot.
And I'm just like, you're just going to keep questioning this guy when you literally just sacrificed everything to get here. And you're just like, I don't know. Is that the best idea? But
right. My feel on her in these last 2 episodes and how she dealt with Thrawn was more along the lines of like, well, these Night Sisters vouched for you.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
You know,
okay.
these great mothers reached out to me through my dreams who were just like, we need you to come get this guy.
Right. So she doesn't really know what she's getting into exactly.
I don't think. I mean, there's never been any indication that the two of them have worked together directly.
Yeah.
And there was somebody else, I think actually might have been Van Lathan on the Midnight Boys, shout out to them, where he was talking about what is interesting about Thrawn is that he welcomes other people's opinions and ideas.
Yes.
He's not your typical Imperial officer that's going to be like, oh, you don't like what we're doing here? Take him off to the brig or like shoot him in the brain.
Right.
It's just like, I hear what you're saying, and maybe I'll even incorporate that idea into what I'm doing, but let me explain to you why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
He's not somebody that's going to shut out other ideas, because I do think what is interesting about him is, especially because he comes from outside of the human race and he comes from an outsider perspective in the Empire, where they may be so much like individualist and so much like we have to do it this way, it's my way or the highway. Thrawn is much more of a comes at it from a different perspective, obviously from being in the Chiss ascendancy, which is very much like for a greater cause, for a greater good sort of thing, and also this idea of like people didn't listen to me when I came in here.
Yeah.
And I had good ideas.
Yeah.
And so like I all that to say, yes, I clocked that she questioned almost literally every decision he made. And you know, we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, exactly. So back on the surface, as Baylan and Shin come upon the Oregon Trail party of Ezra, Noti, and Sabine,
Yes.
Baylan tells Shin to kill Sabine and Ezra and take her place in Thrawn's resurgent empire. Quote, your ambition drives you in one direction, my path lies in another. It appears he still hasn't told Shin precisely where he's going.
Nope.
But what did you think of this breakup between like Master and Padawan here?
I was surprised, personally. I thought that their bond seemed very strong to me. And not that it isn't, but I kind of figured they were in it till the end.
Yeah.
So for Baylan to kind of say, oh, I've got something else going on over there, and there will obviously be more on that later. I was kind of surprised with that, and the fact that he would kind of just be like, "No, you're ready. You're on your own. Let me give you this last few nuggets of wisdom, and you're just be patient. Don't rush into try to seize victory because that can lead to defeat."
Yep.
But I thought we'd see a lot more of these two together. Personally,
yeah. I mean, I did too. I mean, I thought it was interesting as well. Like, there's kind of a similarity to like Obi-Wan and Luke, the breakup. Like, the line is right before like Obi-Wan becomes one with the Force. He says, "Your destiny lies along a different path than mine."
Sure.
And I thought that was kind of an interesting parallel to have there. Not as cool, but
right.
And I was kind of bummed as well. I felt like there was something else to be had with that relationship than we were led to believe. So I mean, it leaves a lot of questions, a lot more questions than answers.
It does.
So now a good old-fashioned Western-style chase ensues, and despite their best efforts to aid Ezra with slingshots and rocks, he instructs the Noti to circle the wagons and to seal up to provide protection. This is a great nod to Ezra with his slingshot in season 1 of Rebels.
Indeed, yeah, there you go.
So after failing to negotiate in classic Ezra fashion, Shin orders her goons to fire on the two friends, and Ezra chooses to go au naturel, despite Sabine's resistance, leaving his lightsaber in her hands. Shin and her goons, supported by Thrawn's reinforcements, charge into the fray as she singes Ezra's hair with the first stroke. And as things are heating up, AHSOKA, who has just survived her own rematch with Baylan with an assist from Hu Yang, arrives in the nick of time. There's a lot happening here. A lot just happened.
A lot of simultaneous fights.
I blew through a lot of that. But what did you... I mean, I guess the set pieces... What did you think of these as far as Ahsoka's fight with Baylan? First of all, the jump from the ship, that CG scene was just I was almost unwatchable. Like
Really?
when if they put it in the recap of the next episode, actually,
They did.
and I was like, oh, why? Well, that's the shot we're gonna choose. Like she just kind of like blowing off the surface. Anyway,
Yeah.
but I liked the fight though. I thought the fight was good.
I agree, especially because we were seeing a lot of that choreography from her training with the Anakin Holo
Yes,
video playing
yes,
out in
yes.
like in practical fashion.
Yes.
I enjoyed that fight. What I think has been very cool about this series is something we mentioned in the first episode is kind of this idea of, you know, Sabine and Shin, you know, they lock eyes, and those moments are usually reserved for people that are, you know, heavy rivals or have a lot of emotional thing. And I think at this point, it certainly feels that way.
For sure. I mean, it's like it's the equivalent. There's always two, you know, master and Padawan. So
yeah, and I think there's an interesting moment here where Balin says like, "You can't defeat me," and I know a lot of people online were kind of bumping against that, just being like, "Well, you know, Ahsoka has beaten Maul at this point. She's gone toe to toe with Vader, and she can't beat Balin." And I'm like, I don't necessarily think that that's what the show is trying to say here.
Yeah,
I don't.
It's not a literal like you're gonna beat me in this lightsaber fight, beat me situation. I think he just know, again, it's the patience of the victory thing. He just knows that by her being here and not being on the ship that's about to take off, like you've lost basically.
Yeah.
Or you're losing. You like there's no way for you to win. So, and it's also Balin's style, right? It's to manipulate the person mentally while fighting them. You know,
Dude
or
plays
like,
mind games.
Yeah, he plays
yes.
his mind games. He knows what he's doing, and I think there is a level of that he's employing with that. He's saying that. I mean, maybe he doesn't actually believe it. Who knows? But I think it's helping him in the fight.
Yeah, no, I think he is absolutely manipulating her, and to all of that point, she doesn't need to beat him, and
No.
she uses that opportunity to be like, yeah, maybe, but I don't need to beat you. She's basically
very Obi-Wan of her,
Very much so.
which I loved. You know,
yeah, because her path, and that's another Jedi thing is like there's no point in revenge. There's no point in her like getting any sort of gratification in killing this guy.
Yeah,
it
doesn't do it for her. That's not the Jedi way.
But during this sequence, what I thought was very cool, and I hope they continue to develop, you know, throughout, is Ezra's Force karate.
Yeah,
I thought that was really cool and like a really neat idea, and I think it mostly boiled down to a lot of force pushes, but I think that could be a really neat creative way for them to develop how Jedi and force users fight in general.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen there's a really effective scene of Darth Maul, or well, I guess just Maul at this point, fighting his way through another hallway scene, a Venator class, you know, Star Destroyer, at the end of Clone Wars with no lightsaber.
Yeah.
And it's always really impressive to see how these Force users are able to wield the Force in such a way where it's like, I don't even need to draw my weapon.
Yeah.
That to me is always the most impressive. And if Ezra is able to like use more like, let me just turn this dude upside down or like twist him around and like, you know, shoot him over that way. And there's just, I think it was a cool little taste of something that I think they can be way more creative with and continue to build on with that character and his fighting style.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I mean, I think it's a little weird to watch at first, and you're kind of not sure exactly. And I think the sound effects are what actually sells all of that. And I think any of the Force sound effects, it's like if you play that scene without the Force sound effects in, I saw it online. It's hilarious.
Oh,
like,
really?
like it's just people getting pulled like out of nowhere, and he's just going. You know, like that's there's no sound. Like this, the hum and clash of the lightsabers is one thing, but just.
It just goes to show you the importance of our, you know, our Foley artists.
That's
and sound
right.
effects
That's
people,
right. That's
you know,
right. The people in the booth.
Mad
Absolutely.
respect to Post.
Mad respect. So I mean, I think one thing. Oh, I was bummed that the Night Troopers didn't turn into like Night Sister Mist because I was hoping they were reanimated at the time. More on that later.
More on that later. Oh, one other thing before we move on. I believe this is in this fight with Balin, we actually see Ahsoka use both her lightsabers for, I think, the first time, which I think is a nice reference to, again, talking about Ahsoka the White, her return. She's feeling her full self again, and she is returning to her full and final form and is able to fight at her full capacity.
Well, I mean, it's the first time she's fought Balin with both.
Balin, that's true. She's fought, I think, Morak and maybe somebody else with
those in the opening scene, she uses both of them.
That's true.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, it was cool. She like went back to her form and like you were saying, using this stuff from the training videos. So, anyway, so Thrawn notices that Balin has bailed.
Hey, yeah.
On his Padawan and instructs his troops to fall back. So Shin is left on her own with no reinforcements. And knowing she's beat, Ahsoka offers her help and if she surrenders her weapon. She hesitates and then runs to her mount, escaping despite the protests of Sabine.
Yeah.
I love this moment. It to me, it felt so like wise Jedi and to showing the Padawan kind of how to really be the Jedi that she wants people to be. You know, I guess the best way to put it. And I thought the actress who played Shin, that moment of not saying anything, but saying a lot with your face and how you're acting, and it's hard to do. And I thought this moment was a really great indication of her skill as an actor, but also just like sold it really well, you know, in general. So
I think it's great.
I got excited for a second. I'm like, is she gonna do it? And then she ran away, and I was like, oh man.
I agree. I felt the tension of the conflict. It felt like within her of just like maybe there is something here,
and she just got bailed on. I mean, she just like, you know, her master just told.
Which, if there was any point where Thrawn threw Elsbeth any sort of shade, it was here. Where he's just like, when they're like, "Oh, Balin's not here," and he kind of looks at her like, "So your dude just like took off? Then he's gone. He's not around. He's not around." I mean, we'd be winning right now.
Some guy you got there, Morgan.
And he even says, like, as they're retreating, he's like, oh, okay, retreat. These are acceptable losses given the fact that Balin wasn't around. Interesting.
Yeah.
You brought him, by the way. You questioned me. You brought him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's sit down over there. Oh, gosh. All right, so she runs away. After Ahsoka hugs Ezra, she laughs aloud, which was kind of a fun, you know, relief moment for everybody to
nice
hear.
To see her smiling again. Yeah,
and it seems all is forgiven. And she says, Sabine says, "I thought you were dead." Dead.
And even Ezra's just like, wait, you thought what? You conveniently left that out of the recap.
This was one of those moments where I'm like, how are they gonna get out of this pickle? Like,
oh my god,
there's lots of splaining to do here.
Yeah.
I don't know. What did you think of this reunion? Like, I mean, to me, it was a little bit clunky, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, I didn't feel like enough was said, and I thought some things were talked about that didn't need to be talked about, and I was just kind of like, what's happening right now? Like, these characters, none of which we've met before this season, are not talking about the things that I feel like they would talk about, but I don't know. It was just, to me, I was just like, okay. And that's honestly, unfortunately, one of my criticisms of, and this will get into the next episode, but of the show so far, these reunion moments, just not doing it for me. They're just not, whether it's with the villains or the characters from the show, for some reason the Lego pieces aren't snapping together for me in those moments. And that's tough. I don't know if it's because we don't have the backstory but I mean, even as I've been watching it as a Rebels fan, and I'm much further along now than when we started, it's still not doing it for me. I don't know. That's just unfortunately one of the criticisms for me from the show.
I can totally see that, and I think I agree to a point. I think some of them have worked better than others. I don't know if you call this a reunion, but Thrawn's arrival I thought was very effective.
Yes,
I know some people have
introduction though, not a reunion.
Not a reunion. I thought, and his reunion with Sabine, quote unquote, was a little like, oh, okay,
yeah.
He's just like, oh, good to see a familiar face, and like that's that.
Yeah.
I agree that this was a little clunky, and I think there was, and part of the difficulty is this idea, and I think this is a weird trick that the show had to pull off.
Yeah. And
we'll discuss, I think, at the end of next episode how effectively they did that.
Yeah.
Of trying to be, a servant to two masters in a way where they need to pay off things that fans of a 4-season-long animated show have been waiting for years.
Yep.
And also make these same moments resonate and feel genuine to people that have no idea who these people are.
Yeah, it's a very tough needle to thread.
Very tough. And I don't know that they quite did it in this moment. I think that there's a lot of relief in Ahsoka's emotions here for several reasons. Number one, because, we know earlier in the season, she's like, I think we're going to have to leave Ezra gone. And I think it was a personal mission for her to get him back, considering that he saved her life.
Yeah.
And, pulled her out of a near-death situation. And it represents, in a lot of ways, the completion of that mission for her.
Yeah.
Granted, they still have to get him home.
Right. That thing.
That whole thing. But the fact that she even sees him is probably something that she wrote off as a possibility. It seemed seemingly a long time ago.
Yeah, it's true.
And so I think that was really cool. But yes, because of not getting that recap on screen and not knowing exactly what Sabine has told Ezra about this situation leaves some questions as far as like, well, what is everybody feeling at this moment?
Yeah, I think, and it's just also tough when you have two main stories, and or I should say three. There's three people's heads you're in all the time on the show.
Yeah.
It's Thrawn, Ahsoka, and Sabine. And when you have two of those people are in the same room, it's like, whose head are you going to be in during this scene?
Yeah.
And at that point, you get into like these kind of wide three shots where they're all kind of like Spider-Man pointing at each other, like, you know, what's going on, and that becomes, you kind of lose the through line. So it's tough. It's not an easy show to make.
Yes.
Television is hard, folks.
It's very tough. It was not, a tearjerker moment for me. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, cool. No, I'm glad they're together. But I wasn't like hit in the feels.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's nice to see the change in her with the emotion and Ahsoka being a little more lighter and all that sort of thing. But I just think she's just way too easy on Sabine here also. I mean, like, I think if it was more like a, hey, saved your ass, we're going to talk later, but we got to go. Like, that would be kind of a scene. Like, we can't have this moment right now because we are about to try to catch a ship that's going to ruin the entire galaxy.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of like, not that.
No.
So, I don't know. I think it's just, again, also Sabine's, we're harping on this a lot, but it was a big moment. I think Sabine's character, again, underwritten here because, like, she's like, I thought you were dead, but it would have been just so nice to see that she was, like, broken up about that. Like, it's like if she had actually sold on screen, oh my gosh, my master is full on dead. Like, I'm never going to see her again, and registered that at all on screen before this moment, it's like, then you kind of have that kind of full circle-ish, but she's just like, oh, I thought you're dead. Like, what? Like, I don't know. It was lackluster.
I agree. And not to let them off the hook, because I think that is true. There's a moment in Rebels where they're even talking about it's Kanan as he's training Sabine to use the Darksaber, and he's talking to Hera about like her potential and how he's struggling to kind of make the same connections that he was able to do a little bit easier with Ezra.
Yeah,
and he's just like, she's just so closed off, she's so like tightly wound, and so like he struggles for the words, and Hera's just like, Mandalorian, and he's like, yes, exactly. And I think that is a part of. If I were to say there's a reason for it, I would say that's the reason for it, is that she's just like emotionally walled off. I don't think that makes for the best emotional stakes, which is unfortunately what you need in a moment like this.
Yeah.
And so I completely agree. I would have liked to see those foundations crack a little bit here,
right, and
see a bit more emotion. And I think we're going to be having a similar conversation next episode as well.
Stay tuned, folks.
Where, I think it would be nice to. Sabine has never been super emotional.
Yeah.
And I think it's getting to the point where you kind of need to see that, though, to resonate and connect with this character.
Yeah.
Or else you see her making these decisions that make you kind of question her loyalty, question her decision making, but you want to see that weighs on her.
Yeah.
And we're not really seeing that. We're kind of seeing she's kind of, oh, well, like, oh, I thought you were dead. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't as like that necessarily, but it wasn't far off.
Right. I mean,
it was closer to that than it was like a tearful, like, oh my God, I'm so glad to see you.
Right. I mean, you'd think it should be carrying all that guilt too, but it's just tough. Like you said, short series, well-loved character that has all this weight on her and backstory to her. And the show has to deadlift all of that right off the rip, and while also introducing the character. So it's a tough moment.
Granted, and it's been like a week or so since I've watched this episode, so maybe maybe this is in there. But even if they're not going to go big with her emotions here, which is totally fine, maybe have her shrink into herself a little bit more.
Yeah, some sort of swing. Yeah,
of just like, oh, there's this really happy reunion going on, and like. And him being like, hey, like, come on over here. And she's just like, like, yes, I'm happy to see you. But, but I didn't feel that. And or at least as I'm trying to remember, I don't remember getting that emotion from her that she was just like, oh, wow. Like, I made the decision I made, which does, illuminate a little bit why she made the decision she made. Of just like, well, she's gone. What else am I going to do?
Yeah.
But at the same time, if that's the case, yeah, just I would have liked to have seen that drawn out a little bit more, or seen it played out a little bit more plainly, rather than her just kind of giving her usual, just like kind of smirk and just like,
meow, meow. I'm going to blast some things.
Yeah.
All right. So finally back on the SS Night Sister shenanigans and cool wardrobe, Thrawn, he spins this as a win. After seeing for some reason,
does.
saying Ahsoka Tano has lost the one thing she could not afford to lose today. Time.
I said it as he said it. Like I was watching the episode, I was
Yeah.
like, time. You're like, yeah, dude.
It's the Leonardo DiCaprio moment, you know, it's just like
Right there, time.
And that's. And you have anything else from this recap wise? I mean, I would say overall, kind of a filler episode.
I would agree with that.
unfortunately.
I would say this, especially after that, I feel like a couple weeks of really high highs with the show. This felt a little bit of a lull episode to me,
Yep.
and kind of like a 5-footer where they didn't really progress very far. And especially now, well, we can get into that episode. We can get into that next episode, but I have some questions about the tactics. I have more questions for this tactics and strategy of Sabine and Ezra and Ahsoka than I do for Thrawn at this point, to be completely honest with you.
I'm there with you. There are some questionable choices
Choices
being made.
that I'm like, okay, why?
But tune in. We're going to take a quick break. We will see you back here for part 2. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff.
Yes.
We'll be posting these episodes simultaneously, so the next one should be up by the time you're listening or watching this.
You can binge it.
You can binge the whole thing, just like you can do with Ahsoka, and then listen to us back again.
You're just like, what did they think of the last episode? You don't need to wait. You don't need to wait. You can listen now.
It's instant gratification.
What's better than that?
What's better than that, honestly? We'll be right back. See you.